What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie. Today, I'd like to start a two-part video deep dive into Frank Zappa's latest box set, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, the one-size-fits-all 50th anniversary box set that I think it officially gets released in late September, but if you ordered it online, Zappa.com, they've been mailing them early, which I think this is the first time they've ever done that. Usually the release date comes and you're still waiting to get your release. Not this time. So I'm going to break this into two videos. I'm going to talk about the first two discs today, which are hyper focused on one size fits all and sort of the creation of that album through like a song's first recording through like what it would ultimately end up being. And then the second two discs are a complete live show plus other live goodies. I'm going to make that a separate video. So today I'd like to talk about the first two discs, which contain the 2012 remastering, I think it's 2012, right? Remastering of One Size Fits All, which I think I'm hearing for the first time. Both of my copies, my vinyl copy, my CD copy, are the original masters. Didn't really hear much difference other than the bass seems a little bit fatter and a little bit more present. I think One Size Fits All is arguably maybe his best sounding release anyways. So having it remaster is really just, really just tweaking the most minor of things because it already sounds absolutely fantastic. So there's that. And then there's, I think, 19 tracks that pretty much track the development of One Size Fits All. So every track on the original album is represented at least once with an alternate mix or an early version in the same sequence as the album tracks. So literally you get an alternate version of the album as it's being built over the course of the disc one, the second half, and disc two. And back in the day, I want to say starting in the early 2000s, it might have been late 90s, the Zappa Family Trust did this series of releases called Project Object. And each one of those would look at either a specific album or, in the case of Lumpy Money, two albums that were kind of built at the same time, so they worked together well. And they were called audio documentaries. And they really got into the minutia of Zappa building these albums with alternate takes. And, you'd get a number of versions of the same song over and over again. And I really liked sort of the marketing angle of that because I thought it was pretty clear from the beginning of what you were going to get, that you were really going to get in the weeds and really get into how he built these. And yes, this version might not be much different from the release version, but there is this minor part that Frank would later drop out or build upon. And so as someone who is a hardcore Zappa fan, I'm making a video, I really, really like those releases and I appreciated those releases. But on the spectrum of Zappa fans, I figure the more you get to the casual side, the less interest those had. And I think almost all of their releases have this project object side to them. That is essentially what these first two discs are, the project object version of One Size Fits All. How many casual fans need 4 different versions of Can't Afford No Shoes? How many casual fans need 5 different versions of San Bernardino? I like them. I appreciate them. Some of these things are going to be playlist worthy because I want to go back and listen to them. But I'm wondering if by hyper focusing on this creation and not being a little more curating on which of the alternate Ralphie Stuffs His Shoes takes needs to be released versus let's release all of them, even though all of them are not on here. We've got take 5 and not takes 1 through 4. So there is some curating going. I appreciate it, but I'm wondering on the spectrum, and I'm interested in the comments, if you're a casual Zappa fan, where you rank yourself, what your thoughts are on the first two discs. I enjoy them. I'm going to tell you why I enjoy them. But I kind of wish that in releasing these things, there would be maybe 3 different versions, like the One Size Fits All Project Object version. You get these 2 discs. Maybe there's extra stuff. They make it 3 discs for the purpose of the people who just want that. And then you get the second release, which is the One Size Fits All concert, this concert that's in the box set. And then if you want all of them, you can get the massive box set. I kind of think maybe they would push more product, which is what you want to do, right? Because you want to expose people to Frank Zappa. But I'm interested in what you think of these first 2 discs. So anyways, that's kind of rambling. But disc 1, again, it starts off with the original album, which is Probably a top five Zappa album. Over the years, I've done a number of sort of bracket style tournaments of Frank Zappa's greatest album. One size fits all. I think won one of those and was in the final four. And the other two, I think I've done it 3 times. Once here on YouTube, and then back in the day over like message boards and stuff like that. And one size fits all is always like a final four album. Absolutely amazing. I ranked it as number 11 when I originally did it, only because I personally have a problem with Can't Afford No Shoes. One, I think its placement after Inca Roads is not good. Over the years, I've tried to decide if I just had these nine songs, right? That's what it is, 9. Which of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which of these should follow Inca Roads? And I think the simple tweak of going Inca Roads, Sofa, Pajama, Can't Afford No Shoes makes this a better album. I don't like Can't Afford No Shoes. It's just always bothered me. So I purposely put it at 11 to make a statement. But one size fits all. I mean, it contains 3 of what I would argue are Frank's all-time great songs. Inca Roads, Florentine Pogan, Andy, just perfection, kind of proggy type stuff, but in a Frank way. Some amazing guitar solos. This band is absolutely possibly the most perfect band Frank ever had. George Duke, Napoleon Murphy Brock, Chester Thompson, Ruth Underwood, Tom Fowler, Frank. Some special guests on the album, including Captain Beefheart himself, dropping some harmonica. The album is just, I mean, it really is kind of perfect, and it sounds perfect. Inca Roads, one of his best solos, easily one of his best songs. Can't Afford No Shoes, I don't like it, but I know people do. Sofa, one of his best instrumentals. Pajama People, just a straight up jam. That guitar solo. Every time I go back and listen to it, I'm like, I've underappreciated this guitar solo my entire life. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, all right, I'm going to appreciate it way more often than I ever have before. That guitar solo, it really reminds me of like downhill, like BMX dirt bike riding, where you're just going downhill over bumps and you're just doing all these crazy things and just trying to stay on your bike and not crash. And that's why the entire solo feels like exhilarating. Florentine Pogan, which is just this mirror, this like carnival crazy mirror house. What are those called? Fun houses, whatever we walk through, and there's mirrors and all these crazy things. That's what Florentine Pogan is in a musical sense. Evelyn the Modified Dog, which is him and George just fooling around. San Bernardino, which the rhythm section in this, the groove, the boogie. And then Andy, just an absolutely awesome proggy song. And then Sofa number 2, we get some German in there to end up to finish off the album. It's like a near perfect album. And the remaster version, I think the bass is maybe popping a little bit more. It is an interesting album if you don't know much about it. Like the Inca Roads, the track itself comes from 2 live performances. The basic tracks for almost the entirety of the song, including George Duke's solo, come from the Token of His Extreme or Token of My Extreme or whatever it is. That live performance, that KCET television performance. The solo is a slightly edited, shortened version of the Helsinki solo from You Can't Do That on Stage 2. Put those 2 together, made one epic version. Florentine Pogan, those basic tracks are also from KCET, so that's pretty cool. The rest of the album is just a really, really fun, excellent, amazing listen. If I have a complaint about the album, other than the fact that Can't Afford No Shoes is the second song, is that we don't get the guitar solo in Florentine Pogan. Frank ends the song. We go into Evelyn. Live versions of this in 74 had a guitar solo at the end of it. We need that guitar solo. It was always good. The guitar solo on the Token of His Extreme is arguably a top 10 guitar solo from Frank. Amazing stuff. But yeah, the first 9 tracks of this, if you don't have One Size Fits All, it is a must-own Frank Zappa album. So after that, for the rest of CD1 and all of CD2, we get the alternate takes and sort of the early versions and the prototype versions of this album as the songs are built. For Inca Roads, we only get one. We get a rough mix of the 2 different performances put together. Really not much difference in this mix. I think maybe the vocals have a particular lushness to them that get mixed out. It's definitely not that rough of a mix. There's During the guitar solo, especially in the very beginning of the guitar solo, Duke's keyboards have this really interesting sort of like cirrus cloudy wash that kind of just lay over the solo that would be taken out of the final version, or at least kind of mixed way down. It's an interesting rough version. It's not rough. It's alternative. It's an alternate mix. But it's not that much different than the original version. So we get that. And that's the only thing we have for Inca Roads. I do, maybe because of the lack of time, but it would have been interesting to hear maybe I know we have versions of this elsewhere, but a live version of Inca Roads, maybe from 73, maybe a holiday in Berlin from like early on when the Inca Roads guitar vamp was being played as sort of the intro vamp into that solo. So maybe it would have been cool to piece those different things in here and show how Frank really did take all these disparate ideas and like build Inca Roads. And that would be an argument for like a separate project object, like 3-disc set that really got in the weeds. But no complaints otherwise for that. We get 4 versions of Can't Afford No Shoes. 3 of them called Ralph Stuffs His Shoes, because those were the original lyrics when they first started performing it. Frank does say at one point Ralphie does not stuff his shoes, but we're going to sing about it anyways. And these are pretty interesting. The first one, the token outtake, we come in mid-song. It's a little bit sparser, has this much more hectic sort of stop-start vibe, shoe lyrics. It's a little bit sillier, but then there's just some absolutely fantastic guitar playing in it. And then it just kind of ends. This is the Token Extreme version, so this is like a live performance. Pretty interesting. I think this song... This is another version. This is another song where, like Miss Pinky, I'm currently deep diving into Winter 76, and Miss Pinky would be played at the end of Zoodalures as just an instrumental jam. And then eventually we get the Zoodalures version, which kind of robs it of a lot of its energy and becomes a different beast. Kind of feels like that's what happened with Can't Afford No Shoes. I kind of like the rawness of these early versions. And I don't know. Something about the studio version I feel like it lost a little bit of something. Then we get Ralph Stuffs His Shoes, the basic tracks, no vocals, just straight up instrumental version of this. It just sounds like they're jamming. Sounds pretty good. It's like 5. And the interesting thing is all of these are like 5 minutes long or over 5 minutes long. Frank would eventually cut it down to under 3 minutes for the album. These longer versions just have more instrumental energy and in a weird way work better than that shortened version, which just seems maybe like he's trying to compact too much. I know Frank thrives on purposeful sort of making his listeners uncomfortable. And like, I want to say he intentionally like knew that Inca Roads is this monstrous epic and Can't Afford No Shoes wasn't. So pairing them together was probably in his mind a genius idea. I don't agree. And then finally we get the instrumental mix, a 4.5 minute, some great guitar energy in here, some really cool percussion in here that would be mixed out of the final version. So that's pretty interesting. And then finally we get the Can't Afford No Shoes rough mix, which is the much longer version, which is like almost every idea that appears in the final version is just like repeated twice. So everything is just kind of stretched out. We get a really nice guitar solo energy is fantastic. I don't know. It's interesting. I kind of think these longer versions might be better than the shortened version we end up with. I think the vocals are mixed a little different, so I think that's one of the part. I think the vocals are kind of obnoxious on the original. But interesting journey to hear Ralph Stuffs His Shoes, Can't Afford No Shoes, to see what we ended up with, considering that all of these are longer versions except for the first one, the live one. So those are interesting, but I do think out of all those, that first live version is pretty fun to listen to. After that, to close out the first disc, we have 2 versions of Sofa. The first version does not have any synths in it, so it really is kind of piano dominant and piano centric, which is pretty cool. Some neat percussion that kind of pops up in the mix that isn't prevalent in the OG version. And this one really reminds me of some of the Hot Rat Sessions take, which really were, just a core band playing these songs before Frank would like overdub, the horns or different parts in it. And so you really get what just seems like a purer, cleaner version. I think the original is fantastic, but these are neat versions. And then we get the Sofa early mix, which is pretty close to what we would get on One Size Fits All. So I enjoyed this disc. A solid listen. I think the highlight probably is like maybe that live version of Ralph Stuffs His Shoes. And then everything else, just depend. It isn't really all that much different than the original, though. That Sofa with just the piano and without like Duke synths coming over the top, pretty tasty, pretty tasty. So that's disc one. Disc two, we get 12 more tracks. So you get alternate versions of everything else. We get a Pajama People old mix is what it's called. And I really like this mix. In fact, I think I might prefer this mix more than I prefer the one that's on the album. The bass is way more prominent. There's less piano, so there's somewhat of like a sparser sound. The way when we come into the solo, it just sounds, I don't know what's going on with the solo. I've only listened to it once, so these are my initial remarks. The solo intro just sounded absolutely amazing. The guitar is way more up front, seems way more dominant. There's like weird background sounds going on throughout the entire thing. At the end of the song, we kind of get this live ending, like it does feel like an in-studio jam. Great way to start off this disc. Absolutely love this version of Pajama People. This is like a full-on, like, I think I might make like an alternate mix of One Size Fits All for a playlist. I'm putting this version of Pajama People on there. It sounds fantastic. Next, we get two versions of Florentine Pogan. We get a rough mix and an alternate mix, and both of them have guitar solos. Oh, it's not alternate mix, it's alternate solo. So the first one, we get a 9-minute version of it. The Duke's keyboards just sound way more prominent and way more cool. There is a guitar solo that is fantastic. Every Florentine Pogan should have a guitar solo. We get the dramatic duck call ending that when Ruth would do the duck call. I think it's Ruth that does it, right? Ruth, yeah. And then after that, we get Florentine Pogan an alternate solo. So right where the song ends and the solo would we bring things down and then we build up into the solo. That's where this track starts. And we get an alternate solo. It's a pretty short solo. Definitely not as long as the first version of Florentine Pogan. Definitely not as long as the one on The Token of His Extreme. But it's nice. It's great to hear another guitar solo. It's squirrely. It's kind of scrappy. It's definitely shorter than the others. But it's awesome. We need more Florentine Pogan guitar solos. Next, we get a session outtake of Evelyn, a Modified Dog. Frank's kind of talking George through what to do. Yeah, I mean, he's not really sure of the lyrics, so far. So Frank's kind of stumbling through some of the lyrics. This is like a 3.5-minute track of this. And then we get two things called Bitch, 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 which I did not know what that was. There were some wise guesses that maybe this was an early version of Tush, Tush, Tush. It's not. It's San Bernardino. The two Bitch, Bitch, Bitches on here are early versions of San Bernardino. And the first one is 9.5 minutes long. And this thing is just absolutely awesome. It is a lot of the parts of San Bernardino, but they're kind of stretched out. They're looser. This just feels like a jam. We start off the track, the first Bitch, Bitch, Bitch track, mid-jam. We're already in it. There's harmonica in this, which I believe is Captain Beefheart playing harmonica. And it's looser, it's rawer. We have different lyrics when the lyrics come in. And the best part about this whole thing is it's intertwined with Sleeping in a Jar. Sleeping in a Jar is part of this song. They'll play the San Bernardino adjacent, like some of the ideas you will recognize from San Bernardino. Some of them okay, I can see where that's going, where it's going to end up in San Bernardino, but it's kind of its own new song. And then they go into Sleeping in a Jar, and we get this really cool sort of version of Sleeping in a Jar that's intertwined with the song. And then we go back into the song. We get a whole new set of lyrics, referencing bathroom number 1 and going bathroom number 2. And the lyrics definitely get better by the time we arrive at San Bernardino. Then we go back into Sleeping in a Jar again. And then we go off, and then the jam stops, and then it restarts. Then we go back into Sleeping in a Jar again. This is a fascinating listen. And I really, Really wish he had found a way to keep Sleeping in a Jar as part of this, because it's just such a great song, such a great melody. And being that, like, we get Sleeping in a Jar and Uncle Me, pops back up in the Flo and Eddie era, pops back up here. That would have been really cool if Frank had tried to find a way to incorporate Sleeping in a Jar in, like, every couple years it would like pop back up in a song. Imagine a City of Tiny Lights in which instead of that we do some weird Sleeping in a Jar thing, and then we get to the 80s and in Easy Meat we get some weird Sleeping in a Jar thing. I don't know, it would have been neat if that had stayed sort of a thing that he returned to. But this bitch first version, what is it, bitch in rehearsal, absolutely amazing, a fantastic listen. Then we get bitch, basic tracks, take one. This is much closer to the one size fits all San Bernardino. We get a really short, scrappy guitar solo in there, some great synthesizer sounds, but we're definitely heading more towards San Bernardino. And then we get 3 takes of San Bernardino, different lyrics on the first take. It's not about Potato Head Bobby, but the vocalist is me. The song is about me. It's a first person. We get a really nice guitar solo in here, a longer, much more prominent solo on the first rough mix number 1. Rough mix number 2, we get a really nice long harmonica solo that's longer than what it would be on the final one. And then for rough mix number 3, we're essentially almost back to what the original version would be. The guitar sounds a little bit different. And I don't think we get the sort of ending where Watson is going off. I believe, we don't get those in the bitch, but we get those in San Bernardino. Pretty interesting to listen to this journey. And this really does feel like a documentary because you're hearing it from its early, what feels like a studio jam version into its final version. I've always loved the lyrics of San Bernardino. I grew up in Southern California. My dad owned a construction company, and there were a number of times where trucks had broken down, cement trucks, and he would take them to like some auto works shop, and it was usually out in San Bernardino, out in the Redlands, and you drive out there, if you're driving out the 10 or the 210, it really is nothing but like auto repair shops, or at least it was in the 70s and 80s, for miles and miles and miles. That's where you take all the cars that are hurt. It was true back in the day. Pretty interesting. Then we get 2 versions of Andy, one called Something Anything. This was what this song was called, how it was performed in early 74. We don't get the part at the end with the Andy. That part does not exist. Instead, it's like, something, anything, show me a sign. I think that's what they play, but they sing it better. For the most part, it sounds exactly like Andy. The only thing that really sounds different is that sort of bluesy part early on is a little more, it just sounds different, has a different vibe. But for the most part, the rest of it is kind of like the normal song. And then we get a solo at the end of this, but we fade out during the solo, which you don't ever fade out during solos. Let's never do that, anybody, ever. And then we get Andy the rough mix, which pretty much sounds like the original. And then we get a Sofa number 2 rough mix, which pretty much sounds like the original. And so that's what we get on disc number 2. And really the highlights of this, I would say, it starts off pretty strong, like Pajama, those Florentines with solos, the Evelyn is fun, the bitches are great to hear. And then once we get to San Bernardino, most of that stuff kind of sounds like the original one size fits all stuff. So that's what's on here. I really enjoy listening to it. I am one of those people who've listened to one size fits all way too many times. So even if like the synth is slightly mixed higher or slightly mixed lower, I'm like, oh, that gives the song an entirely different feel. So on the spectrum of like obsessive to casual, I'm much more toward the obsessive side. I would love to hear from people who are definitely more on the casual side, what they think of these first 2 discs, whether they found them interesting. I know there were people, I've had comments of people who are hardcore fans who don't like this stuff and want something different. I see the value in it. I enjoy listening to this. Plus the next 2 discs are live 74, which is like my mana. So I'm super happy. But I don't know. I thought it was an interesting listen. Both of these discs have like 80 minutes of music on it. They're like pretty much 75 minutes maxed as much as possible. So you're getting a lot of different stuff. It all sounds great, even though they're alternate tracks. So I don't know. Love to know your thoughts on this. If you've listened to this, if you're looking forward to it, what you think about this type of release, what you think of one size fits all, why Can't Afford No Shoes is a great song, all that kind of stuff. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do those things, and peace. Talk to you next time.